There's a certain ache that lingers after being hurt by someone avoidant. It's not the kind of pain that announces itself with loud chaos. It's quieter, more insidious. It's the hollow space that opens up when someone you gave yourself to retreats into silence. It's the unanswered text, the sudden shift in tone, the way their body stiffened right when yours was ready to lean in closer. And what makes it so disorienting is not just the loss itself. It's the contradiction. How can someone who once looked at you with softness suddenly disappear into coldness? How can someone who seemed to need you, crave you, suddenly act as if you were too much? That contradiction keeps you stuck. It keeps you running mental loops at 3 in the morning. You replay the good moments, convincing yourself they had to mean something. You analyze the pulling away, wondering if you were too needy, too available, too loving. And without realizing it, you start bargaining with reality. If I had been less expressive, would he have stayed? If I had been more patient, would he have trusted me? But here's the truth that unravels the whole spell. The way an avoidant partner withdraws, the way they shut down when intimacy grows, it isn't about your worth. It's about their fear. It's about their walls. It's about a nervous system that interprets closeness as danger, no matter how safe, how tender, how extraordinary you are. When you finally allow yourself to see this, not just as a concept, but as a lived reality, you stop blaming yourself for their patterns. And that's the very first step to letting go. Because letting go doesn't happen in one clean motion, it happens in layers. It's the steady stripping away of illusions. It's recognizing that the push-pull wasn't passion, it was instability. That the silence wasn't depth, it was avoidance. That the mixed signals weren't complexity, they were confusion dressed up as intimacy. And here's the hardest, most liberating truth of all. You don't let go of an avoidant because they didn't matter. You let go because they can't meet you where you are going. You let go because staying in that cycle shrinks you. You let go because your life, your love, your softness, your fire deserve to be received in full, not rationed out to someone who is terrified of holding it. Letting go of an avoidant begins with a radical shift in how you interpret their leaving. For so long, their retreat may have felt like rejection, like a verdict stamped on your worth. But what if it wasn't rejection at all? What if their leaving was actually exposure, their actions revealing the limits of what they could give? Think about it. When someone avoids love, they are not rejecting love itself. They are rejecting the responsibility, the vulnerability, the surrender that love demands. And if you mistake that as rejection of you, you will keep chasing what was never in their capacity to offer. You will keep bending, softening, silencing your needs, hoping that maybe next time, maybe if you prove yourself just a little more, they will stay. But imagine if instead of seeing their silence as punishment, you saw it as clarity. Imagine if the very moment they pulled away was the moment you finally stopped twisting yourself into knots and whispered, "Thank you for showing me where your edges are. Thank you for showing me you cannot hold me." This is not coldness. This is not bitterness. This is reclamation, because the truth is, avoidants don't leave because you were too much. They leave because intimacy itself feels like too much. And the moment you allow that truth to land, something powerful happens. Their leaving no longer diminishes you. It liberates you. But I know that word liberation might not feel real yet, because part of you still clings to the illusion of what it could have been. You remember their warmth, their laughter, those flashes of connection that felt like oxygen. And so you tell yourself a story, if only they could face their fears, then maybe the love would be enough. Here's the deeper truth. Love is never enough when fear is running the show. You cannot love someone into safety if they are committed to running. You cannot pour yourself endlessly into a container with holes and expect it to stay full. Sooner or later, you have to turn that love back toward yourself. And when you do, you begin to see their exit differently. Not as the end of your story, but as the clearing of space for something that can actually sustain you. That is the first great shift of letting go, refusing to interpret their avoidance as evidence of your lack, and instead seeing it as proof of their limitation. Because when you see their leaving clearly, the hook of longing begins to weaken. And once the hook weakens, you can finally start asking a different kind of question, the kind that leads you out of the cycle entirely. The second shift in letting go comes when you confront the most seductive illusion of all, the fantasy of their potential. You know the one. The way your mind replays those early moments when they were soft, open, even vulnerable. The way you hold on to the memory of them looking at you like you were the only person in the room. The way you convince yourself that this was the real them, and that the coldness, the withdrawal, the dismissiveness, those were just temporary shadows. But here's what keeps you trapped. Believing that the fleeting glimpses of intimacy were proof of a hidden capacity. Believing that if you just love harder, wait longer, heal them more patiently, you'll unlock the real person behind the avoidance. Let me ask you, what if those flashes weren't glimpses of their hidden potential, but just moments when their fear loosened its grip? What if the openness wasn't sustainable because it wasn't integrated? What if those highs that felt so intoxicating were only possible because they were followed by lows just as sharp? If you've been caught in this cycle, you know how devastating it feels. One day they lean in, making you believe progress is happening. The next, they vanish, triggered, overwhelmed, lost in their own survival reflexes, and you're left questioning yourself again, searching for the key to unlock the version of them you fell for. But here's the truth that breaks the spell. A relationship is not built on potential, it is built on consistency. And avoidance, until they do their own inner work, cannot sustain that consistency, not because you aren't enough, not because they don't feel something, but because intimacy collides with a deep, unconscious terror inside of them. And if you cling to their potential, you end up shrinking yourself into the role of rescuer, healer, or savior. You wait for the day they'll wake up and finally choose you in full. You postpone your own joy, your own expansion in exchange for crumbs of connection. Letting go, then, is not about giving up on love. It's about giving up the fantasy. It's about recognizing that the person in front of you is the reality, not the one you keep building in your imagination. Their words matter less than their patterns. Their promises matter less than their actions. And once you see this clearly, you stop holding your breath for a future that will never arrive. You exhale, you release the illusion. And in that release, you start to feel the first taste of real freedom. The kind that comes when you stop waiting for someone else to become who they never were. And if this is landing for you, if you feel something stirring as I say this, subscribe. We're just getting started. Because the next shift is the one that changes everything. It's the moment you stop focusing on them entirely and begin reclaiming the truth of who you are. The third shift in letting go is the moment you finally turn the mirror back on yourself, not in blame, but in recognition. Because here's the hard truth. If you stayed, if you kept trying, if you kept bending yourself into smaller and smaller shapes just to hold on, it wasn't only because of them, it was because of what you believed about yourself. You see, avoidants don't just survive by running. They survive because they choose partners who will chase. And if you've been caught in that loop, it's because some part of you confused chasing with love. Some part of you believed that proving yourself, waiting, fixing, was the price of admission for intimacy. And that belief didn't begin with them. It was seeded long before, in the moments you first learned that love was something to be earned rather than received freely. And here's where everything begins to shift. When you realize that letting go of them isn't just about releasing a person, It's about releasing the part of you that accepted crumbs and called it devotion. It's about releasing the part of you that made their avoidance your responsibility. It's about releasing the old story that told you love had to hurt in order to count. Because what happens when you stop making their walls your project? What happens when you stop measuring your worth by their ability to stay? You begin to remember something radical, that you were never meant to beg for the bare minimum, that your sensitivity isn't a weakness, it's your brilliance, that your longing for closeness isn't too much, it's the mark of a soul that knows intimacy is sacred. This shift is terrifying at first, because when you stop chasing them, you're left with an empty space. The phone doesn't buzz, the door doesn't open, the fantasy doesn't play on loop anymore. But here's the beauty. Into that emptiness, you can finally pour something else. Your energy, your time, your softness, your fire, your vision for a life that doesn't revolve around managing someone else's fear. And that's when letting go becomes more than just a breakup. It becomes a rebirth. You stop being the woman who waits for a man to choose her and become the woman who chooses herself so fully that no one else's avoidance could ever define her again. And once that identity begins to root itself, you'll notice something remarkable. Their silence no longer feels like a punishment. It feels like proof that you've outgrown what once held you hostage. Which leads us naturally to the next shift. The one where you stop just understanding avoidance and start dismantling the hooks that kept you attached in the first place. The fourth shift in letting go is about dismantling the hooks, the invisible threads that kept you bound to an avoidant even when logic told you to run. Because let's be honest, you already knew the relationship wasn't working. You felt the inconsistency, you saw the distance, and yet you stayed. Why? Because avoidance creates one of the most intoxicating cycles in human connection, the push and pull. Their withdrawal triggers your longing. Their silence awakens your panic. And when they finally return, even just with a breadcrumb, a half-hearted text, a sudden moment of warmth, it feels like oxygen rushing into starving lungs. The relief is so powerful that it convinces you the pain was worth it. But here's the cruel trick. That relief doesn't mean love. It means addiction. It's the high after deprivation, the calm after chaos. And your nervous system, over time, confuses that roller coaster with intimacy. This is the hook, the intermittent reinforcement that trains you to chase them harder, love them deeper, sacrifice yourself more. It's why even when they disappear, a part of you still waits for the ping of their name lighting up your screen. It's why letting go feels impossible, because you're not just releasing a person, you're detoxing from a cycle your body has mistaken for connection. The shift happens when you start seeing the cycle for what it is. Not proof of love, but proof of trauma bonding. Not the depth of your passion, but the depth of your nervous system's confusion. And once you call it by its real name, the spell begins to break. Because every time you feel the urge to reach out, you can remind yourself, this isn't love, it's withdrawal. Every time you crave their return, you can whisper, this isn't soul connection, it's the hook tightening. And little by little, the craving loses its grip. Here's the most empowering part. As those hooks dissolve, your body begins to relearn safety. You stop mistaking silence for punishment. You stop mistaking breadcrumbs for a feast. You stop mistaking chaos for passion. And in that clarity, letting go doesn't just feel possible, it feels inevitable. And from there, you are ready for the most profound shift of all, the one where you don't just let go of them, but step into the life and love you were always meant to claim. The fifth shift in letting go is stepping fully into expansion, into a love story that no longer revolves around someone else's wounds, but around the wholeness of your own becoming. Here's the truth. When you've been tethered to an avoidant, your world shrinks. Your days revolve around deciphering their moods. Your joy depends on their presence. Your worth hangs on their ability, or inability to choose you. It's a love that makes you smaller, tighter, more anxious. But letting go. That's the moment everything flips. Because when you finally stop gripping the illusion, you create space for life to rush back in. Space for friendships that nourish you, passions that reignite you, dreams that had been collecting dust while you were busy managing their absence. And here's the most powerful part. You begin to attract differently. Because when you choose yourself at this level, when you embody the truth that your love is not a burden but a gift, you stop magnetizing people who run from intimacy. You start drawing in those who lean in, who stay, who meet you with the same depth you're capable of giving. This is why letting go is never just about the end of a relationship. It's about reclaiming your identity as a woman who will never again settle for being half chosen. It's about stepping into a reality where your softness is safe, your strength is honored, and your presence is cherished. Yes, there will be grief. Yes, there will be moments when the old hooks try to pull you back, but now you have the vision. You know that what's ahead isn't emptiness, it's expansion. You know that every ounce of love you once poured into someone unavailable can now be poured into yourself, and eventually into a love that is steady, secure, and sacred. So the final shift is this: you let go. Not because they don't matter, but because you matter more. You release them. Not because you've stopped loving, but because you've started loving yourself enough to no longer shrink for someone who fears intimacy. And in that choice, the cycle ends. The illusion shatters, and you finally step into a love that doesn't wound you, but heals you. That closes the full arc of the 5 core shifts. Full speech draft. The 5 core shifts that free you from an avoidant. When you love an avoidant, the hardest part isn't the silence, the mixed signals, or even the rejection. The hardest part is letting go. Because letting go of an avoidant isn't just releasing a person, it's releasing the hope, the fantasy, and the cycle that kept you hooked long after you knew this wasn't serving your soul. Today, I want to walk you through 5 core shifts that break the spell. 5 shifts that don't just help you release them, but help you reclaim yourself in ways you may not even realize you've been waiting for. And as you listen, I invite you to soften your shoulders, breathe deeply, and let these words reach the part of you that already knows you deserve more than half love. You deserve a connection where your heart can finally rest. The first shift, releasing the fantasy of change. The first shift comes when you finally stop asking, why won't they change? For so long, you've probably replayed conversations, analyzed their patterns, and told yourself if you could just find the right words, the right level of patience, the right kind of empathy, they would wake up. They would see your love and rise to meet it. But here's what keeps you bound. Waiting for an avoidant to become someone they're not ready to be. Their withdrawal isn't about your worth. Their distance isn't proof you failed. It's a defense they built long before you. And until they decide to do their own inner work, they will keep protecting themselves from the very intimacy they crave. The first shift, then, is radical acceptance. Acceptance that this is who they are today, not who they might be one day, not who you glimpsed in fleeting moments, but who they are right now. And once you accept that, you stop negotiating with reality. You stop bleeding energy into a battle you were never meant to fight. The second shift, releasing the illusion of potential. Now we arrive at the second shift, the one that keeps the fantasy alive even when you know better. It's the illusion of potential. Remember those moments when they were soft, warm, even vulnerable? The way they looked at you like you were the only one in the room. Those moments felt like proof that beneath their avoidance, there was a partner ready to emerge. And so you held on, convinced that with enough patience, that version of them would stick. But let's get honest, those highs weren't sustainable. They were real, yes, but they weren't rooted. They were temporary lapses in their fear, not evidence of a hidden soulmate waiting to break free. And every time the walls slammed back down, you found yourself back at zero, clinging to crumbs of what once felt whole. The second shift is releasing the illusion, recognizing that a relationship cannot be built on potential. It is built on consistency, and until that consistency is there, your love is being poured into a sieve. The third shift, reclaiming your power. Now here's where everything begins to change. The third shift is about turning the spotlight back on you. Because let's face it, if you stayed, if you kept trying, if you kept bending yourself into smaller and smaller shapes, it wasn't only because of them, it was also because of what you believed about yourself. Some part of you confused chasing with love. Some part of you believed that waiting, proving, fixing was the price of intimacy. But that belief didn't begin here. It began in earlier chapters when love first felt conditional, when care had to be earned, when you learned to mistake longing for proof of worth. This is why the third shift is so profound. Letting go of them means letting go of the part of you that settled for crumbs. It means reclaiming your truth as a woman whose love is not too much but deeply sacred. It means remembering that your longing for closeness is not a flaw, it's your brilliance. And yes, the space they leave behind feels terrifying at first, but it's in that empty space that your power returns. Your time, your energy, your vision for a life not defined by their avoidance, but by your expansion. The fourth shift, breaking the hooks. By now you're starting to see the truth, but there's still something tugging at you. That's where the fourth shift comes in, breaking the hooks. Avoidant relationships thrive on the push-pull cycle. Their withdrawal triggers your chase. Their silence sparks your panic. And when they finally return, even with the smallest breadcrumb, the relief is so intoxicating, it feels like love. But it's not love. It's addiction. It's intermittent reinforcement, training your nervous system to crave chaos and call it passion. That craving, that is the hook. The fourth shift is naming the cycle for what it is, trauma bonding. And once you see it clearly, you can begin to break free. Each time you feel the pull to reach out, remind yourself this isn't connection, it's withdrawal. Each time you crave their return, whisper, this isn't intimacy, it's the hook tightening, and slowly the craving loosens. As the hook dissolves, you reclaim peace. You stop mistaking silence for punishment. You stop mistaking crumbs for devotion. You stop mistaking intensity for intimacy. The fifth shift, expansion into real love. And that brings us to the final shift. The shift that transforms letting go from heartbreak into rebirth. Expansion. Because here's the secret. Letting go of an avoidant isn't just about losing them, it's about gaining you. Your world begins to widen again. You rediscover friendships that feed you, passions that inspire you, dreams you'd put on hold while managing their absence. And most beautifully, you begin to attract differently. Because when you've chosen yourself at this level, when you've rooted in the truth that your love is a gift, you no longer call in people who run from intimacy. You draw in those who lean in, who stay, who meet you with the depth you've always carried. This is the fifth shift. Stepping into a reality where your love doesn't shrink you, it expands you. Where your heart isn't punished for wanting closeness, it's cherished for it. Where the end of this chapter is not the loss of love, but the opening to a love that is secure, steady, and soul-nourishing. So yes, letting go is painful. Yes, it requires courage. But it's also the most powerful declaration you can ever make. I choose me. I choose the life, the love, the wholeness I was always meant for. And when you choose yourself at that level, the spell breaks, the cycle ends, and your heart, for the first time in a long time, becomes free to love fully again.